Good evening, I'm Sergeant Candidate 123. The issue is one of my subordinates have approached me and admitted to having an alcohol problem. My first goal is to establish a successful action plan together with my officer that enables him or her to overcome the chronic disease of alcohol addiction. My second goal is the protection of the citizens, the officers, and the department. I'll immediately find a private place for us to discuss the issue. I would check for signs of intoxication by checking for slurred speech, dilated eyes, smell of the breath, as well as their appearance. While checking for signs of intoxication, I'm going to introduce myself as their new sergeant. I'm going to explain that my role as their sergeant is to not only be a good leader, but a good coach, role model, and a resource as well. I'll also explain my management philosophy is to be open and transparent. I hold integrity, respect, and accountability in the highest regard with not only myself, but my subordinates as well. I aim to guide my officers and myself in accordance to the HPD's mission. I will ask the officer to explain to me why he or she felt there was an alcohol problem, what led to this conclusion. I will inquire about their home life, their spouse, children, any financial problems or recent loss. I will explain that I'm not trying to push or prod for anything other than helping to identify their underlying issues so that proper resources can be utilized. If my officer is forthcoming with their underlying issues, such as marriage or financial issues, then I will advise them of our peer support, our psych services, our support hotline from the union, as well as our financial advisors from the union, and Alcohol Anonymous, EAP, as well as outside support via our insurance. I will also introduce FMLA for them if time off is needed for healing. I will ask them when was their last alcoholic beverage to determine if the officer came to work with alcohol in their system. We will create an action plan to get the officer the help he or she needs. I will, however, explain to the officer that they would be placed on immediate desk duty for their safety as well as for the public safety. We would agree on an action plan that would include daily check-ins for me to check the officer's progress to see how they're doing emotionally as well as physically. I would then check their reports and their work cards daily to ensure productivity, and I would explain this to the officer so that they would become in agreement with me. Afterwards, I will create a documented working file and maintain it on the officer with everything that we discussed on this day as well as the actions taken. If my observations of the officer and their answer to consuming alcohol prior to work is inconclusive, then I would immediately advise the officer that action will need to take place and we would need to get them help. I will take the officer's weapon for officer safety as well as for the safety of the peers and the citizens. I will notify my lieutenant of the situation and contact IAD for immediate drug testing and relief of duty. The officer would not be allowed to drive themselves home for the safety of the citizens, the officers, and themselves. In summary, I believe this employee is salvageable. By making the hard decision to bring their problems to me, show the officer wanted help with their disease. If it was determined the officer had not consumed alcohol prior to their shift and was not under the influence, then the officer and I made an action plan of the resources there for them. And I also placed them on desk duty for their safety. I immediately notified my lieutenant of the situation and the actions that were taken. If it was determined the officer was under the influence or it was inconclusive, then I immediately retrieved the officer's duty weapon for officer safety. I notified my lieutenant and the Internal Affairs Division for immediate drug testing and relief of duty, as well as an IED investigation of the officer. I also took the vehicle keys of the officer and I assisted IAD in the required paperwork. This concludes my scenario.